This is Views in Paradox. Classics.
Welcome, any and all, to Views in Paradox Classics edition. This is our VIP Film Club spinoff, where we go over a series of, dare I say, seminal classics. And today's is On the Waterfront. I will be discussing this with my very consistent co-host for this series, Jose Venutolo. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me again.
Of course, you haven't killed anybody yet, so we're keeping you on. And Danielle Gibson, welcome.
Hey, what's up? Hello. Hi.
Nice. And a cameo by Danielle's puppy in the background.
Jules.
Can you find her?
Oh, I
No,
she gave it away.
Okay.
She shows where Waldo was. She was like, "There's Waldo."
No, he's right there.
He's right there.
To comfort the audience, and if we bore you, you can just watch the dog.
Yes.
Not that she's gonna do a whole lot. Probably just now.
She might not.
That's true.
She might sleep.
She might not.
But On the Waterfront is what we're here to talk about today, from 1954, directed by Elia Kazan, starring Marlon Brando, Carl Malden as Father Barry, Lee J. Cobb as Johnny Friendly, and Rod Steiger as Charlie Malloy. This movie, what did you guys think of this? This was, I believe, Danielle's pick.
Yeah.
So why don't you kind of start us off?
Yeah. Okay. So honestly, I picked this because when you asked me if I wanted to be on the show, you were like, "Oh, we're picking like classic movies we've always wanted to see that, maybe we won't get around to seeing ever." And so I thought of this just because in a lot of my classes, they bring this up for a few scenes that we'll talk about soon. And so I was just curious to see the rest of it. But it was those scenes that were the most memorable for me on my first watch. And there were a few moments where I actually did get some chills. I enjoyed it. I don't mean this to be like a negative thing, but I feel like I've enjoyed this one the least of all the ones we've watched.
That's
But
fair. We've watched some good ones.
We've watched some really good ones. Well, that's the thing. I feel like I had like a strong reaction or connection to all the other ones, and this one I was just like, this was a pretty good movie, and that like period.
Right.
But it's worth a watch if you're looking for something to watch, I think.
Yeah, we'll see when we get into
Yeah.
it, but I do feel like on the surface of it, it feels a little shallower, maybe, than some of the other,
Yeah.
or just like a little bit more face value. Like it kind of presents to you what it is. I do think it has some depth to it, but it seems fairly clear what the movie's trying to do and trying to discuss. Just to backtrack a little bit, this film, for those who might not have watched along, we are going to spoil it. It is famously the movie where Marlon Brando says, "I could have been a contender." We'll talk about that scene a little bit later. But just to give a reference, this is super famous and you have heard lines from it. It is about the Longshoremen's Union, which is run by the mob, and it is based on it's inspired by actual events. All of the characters are renamed, but they are essentially one-to-ones for real life people. There was a priest who was speaking out against the mob-run unions that were exploiting the longshoremen, and this happened for a lot of years where they just sort of didn't have the ability to overturn it. And so we have Marlon Brando is the younger brother of one of the higher ups in the mob, and he was once a prize fighter, a boxer, and now he's just kind of a down on his luck guy, being taken care of by his mob brother. But he slowly discovers that he sort of has more stake with the actual men in the union than with the mob that runs it. So just as a brief overview, and as always, we will talk about the movie in full spoilers, as though you watched it, but you might get some insight even if you haven't. And before I go any further, I'll just say, give us a like if you're on the page, give us a subscribe, help us out, and I hope you enjoy the rest of it. Jose, why don't you give us your first impressions? Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, it's also my first time watching it. I didn't know what this movie was about, like, at all. So I went in like really blind about it. I'm really glad that you picked this because it wasn't really on my to watch radar, but I'm really glad to kind of have it in my what's the word?
Film arsenal.
Yeah. In my lexicon, my personal lexicon. So yeah, let's talk about, I guess, some of the symbols. The pigeons is a great place to start because they're all over this movie. He like what? He raises racing pigeons, is what it seems like. And
I feel super morbid because when they first started talking about pigeons, I was like, oh my God, they like make the pigeons fight. Like that was the first thing I thought of because I was like, that's super illegal. Like, but yeah, no, I figured it out after a while. Sorry, that's just
I guess because you can train pigeons to home in on places, so they must all be trained to like home in on the same end point.
Oh yeah,
and then you can race them.
It makes a lot more sense that they would race than fight. So
I didn't know that was a thing. It seems very strange hobby to have, to be, pigeon raising. Because like right from the opening scene, he like lures a guy onto the roof about pigeons, and I was like, I thought they were talking in code. Like I thought that they were that they had like a prearranged deal, and that like, hey, you lost a pigeon was the code word. So I was rather thrown off when the guy then got thrown off of the rooftop, because I was like, oh, this it's not code. I thought for sure he was like a mob guy.
But there was funny business.
You mean when the dummy gets thrown off the building?
Yeah, when the dummy.
This such clear dummy that doesn't move its arms.
Yeah.
I like, going starting on that sense. I'm just figuring out by you two talking that the pigeons were used for fighting. I thought it was like carrier pigeons. Racing. I thought it was racing. Like. Okay, so I had no idea that was the case. Also, like the character of Terry. Terry's not the person that takes care of the pigeon. He just does it after because he feels that he was instrumental on the death of the guy who's the guy.
He has his own pigeons, right?
Yeah,
but he also
I'm pretty sure he
might take. Yeah, I think he definitely has his own pigeons because he's got his little gang, right? And
then that's why they go and like kill them all at the end.
Yeah, that's also why they kill them.
Spoiler alert, guys. Yeah.
What I understood is that Joy, the guy that he's calling, and he's like, hey, I found one of your pigeons and blah blah. I think that's the guy because it said Joy's coop.
Yeah.
So Joey was the person that raised the pigeons, and then after Joey died, then I think Terry, like Marlon Brando's character, just went and said, like, out of guilt or something, he was started taking care of the pigeon, and then he commissioned the Golden Kids, like his little gang, commissioned it to just give them, like, help me with these, and then that's what they get back at him on it. I mean, that's what I understood. That's what he was not connected to the pigeons at all. This is why when he comes, he says, like, I found one of your pigeons, not one of our pigeons or one of the pigeons. It's like one of your things.
He said that. I thought he was saying that, like, one of the pigeons got into his coop.
Oh,
I'm curious.
That is what he says to him. He's like, that one of your pigeons. He's returning a pigeon because he says it got to his coop, but it's obviously not Joey's pigeon because he just lets it go. Right.
Yeah.
I kind of got the feeling that he was also another pigeon guy, but it's possible that you're right. Because I do remember the Joey's coop tag, like, on the side of the building. So I don't remember if there was more than one or not. What were you thinking, Danielle?
It also fits in with what he does in the movie, because he just generally feels bad because like, as soon as we see Joey get thrown off the roof, we see him inside with a bunch of other mobsters, and he's like, oh, I didn't think they were going to kill him. Why did they kill him? And everyone's like, yeah, whatever, like,
Yeah.
And he goes, and I don't know if he, like, keeps talking to his sister because he feels guilty, but I think he more so just likes her. But it could be both. It could be both. I think it's a little
combi.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be one single thing.
Yeah. So I'm curious to go back and watch that.
It does fit if it's Joyce, because it's after this incident that the mob puts him in with they give him a quote unquote cushy job with the longshoreman, where he can just sit around all day. And so at that point, right, like, he goes from being a hawk, the mobsters, to a pigeon, right, a worker. And there is a speech at one point about how there are hawks in the neighborhood that hunt pigeons. So I think that is, like, the ultimate signaling of the visual metaphor of the pigeons. There's also the scene where they throw coins, and it looks like somebody throwing birdseed, and everybody just, like, immediately goes down to, like, pick up the coins. It's like how the mob deals with them. Just like, all right, get off my back. Here's some birdseed. Crazy fact about this film is that after its release, the AFL-CIO, which is it's like a union organization that you register with, so that you're compliant and, like, in with the government. They expelled the Longshoremen's Union from this organization after the release of this movie because it was still mob run.
Geez.
So this movie actually did, like, cause some direct, I don't know if it's political action, but some direct action in response to this, that, like, the legit organization was like, oh, this is bad. Because it was all based on, like, there was a lot of testimony. There was a priest who was very outspoken, and who and there was, like, a whistleblower. And this movie just kind of, like, put it out there in a big way that the larger union hub actually responded by kicking them out rather than having the mob just, like, hanging out there. So I feel like, of all the movies we've seen, aside from maybe Metropolis, this one has one of the larger, like, political impacts, I would say, or societal impacts. Like, Seven Samurai has, like, this huge creative ripple. Metropolis, we kind of talked about how it got used in ways that Fritz Lang was not happy about. But this one was, like, very much there was action about corruption, and, like, a very real kind of corruption happening. Not the kind we're used to today, where it's, like, all coming from the top, but just, like, from freewheeling mobsters, man. Like in the 50s, this was like not even that crazy long ago.
Yeah, 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Just like
70 years of people that might be that are alive that probably were there remember that thing as it was. I mean, it's just that it's a less of a philosophical film, more of a social critique film. It's more about an expose.
Yeah.
It's like this is happening. And then it's interesting because when you think about these things, we're used to it right now. We're used to the fact that filmmaking is used to expose things. And then I feel that getting used to it the way that we're used to it is what makes it less effective. But when you think about like maybe 1950s, where this was not the thing that was like shown to people, then the moment that you show it to people, then it creates a bigger ripple. So it doesn't surprise me what you're saying that right after the film, they felt that they needed to change it because, oh, we got discovered, now we need to change this because before people. But right now, there's so much exposition about a lot of things that it kind of becomes more of a sedentary thing, more like, okay, yeah, that's how things are, or the fact of exposing them is not enough for to change those perspectives, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, because otherwise then anybody could use this power to say things also that are not positive. But I find that interesting. I find that like the value of this movie is precisely the fact that it's probably one of the first movies that goes and says, this is happening in this city. This is not a big thing. Like, this is not like a war event or you considering death or you thinking that, like, no, it's just basically this is happening in New York.
And it is an injustice. Yeah, all the same.
Yeah.
There's actually a kind of a huge parallel to Metropolis that I started thinking about it, in that like it takes an outsider to like kick things into gear. Like there's this concept of like the mediator, right, throughout Metropolis. And what's Brando's name in this movie? Terry. And Terry Malloy is kind of that mediator, right? He comes from the mob and then he goes down to the people, right?
And there's a
he's
priest,
the one who kind of calls out the mob for like on their behalf, right? And it doesn't end with a handshake in the way that Metropolis ends, but
it also takes like some encouragement from, a saintly figure, from two, actually, I think. Mostly, I forget her name, but the sister who wants Edie. Yeah, she's like trying to find out who was responsible for her brother's death, and even she had to kind of encourage the priests to like look for actual evidence and not just like, D&D, like play deaf and dumb, or what is it, like duck and
it's
yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that kind of that's a similar role as wow, I'm forgetting the woman's name in Metropolis. Maria.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
That is similar. And like that one is pure fiction, and this one is, but it's like, it's crazy how much it resonates with like a somewhat real story. I mean, a fictionalized version of a real story.
Yeah.
But there's still
she just doesn't go evil.
Yeah, she doesn't. Yeah. She doesn't get replicated, right? And like,
right, she doesn't get turned into a robot that's used for other purposes. I mean, it's always positive when you don't get turned into a robot that is used for evil.
I appreciate not being turned into a robot.
Yeah,
another metaphor there, but anyway.
So and Terry's goals aren't like he's definitely got a conscience, but it's hard to say that he's altruistic. Because he's definitely like, he definitely thinks of himself first, right?
Oh, yeah.
And even in his like, his big rebuttal to his brother near the end, he talks about what was taken from him. It's a very kind of like personal retribution that he wants, So it's like, does he do it for the longshoreman, or does he do it for himself? For his lady love, maybe a little of each.
But I feel more so. You could argue it's more so for him because he just feels guilty. He's doing it so that he can get his lady love. But also, I mean, I think he does care about how she feels because he like kind of tries to shut her down mostly to keep her safe. But then, and he keeps seeing her, even though all the mobsters are like, "Hey, why are you hanging out with Joey's sister? Like, that's really dangerous." So I think he does actually care for her. That's, I guess, not entirely fair for me to be like, it's only for him because he doesn't want to feel things. But I still think he didn't want to feel regret. But I think it's more a more even reasoning now.
Yeah, and having a priest be the person who's like calling for, this conscientious change, it's very much this is someone who represents morality in its purest form. It's being good for good's sake.
Yeah, there was the scene where the whistleblower guy, I forget his name, terrible at names, guys, sorry. But
Joey.
No, not Joey.
Not Joey.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the other guy, the guy that with the whiskey.
Okay. He makes like an agreement with the priest, saying the priest is like, why don't you help me? Why don't you help me? And he's just like, do you promise you'll go like with me to the end? Like, even if I die, you're gonna keep going. You're not gonna like be silenced afterwards. And the priest is like, yes, of course. And then he gets crushed by falling like shipments of boxes of whiskey. Yeah. And so the priest comes and he's like trying to encourage all the workers, like, hey, we need to stop this. And there are mobsters who are watching and who start to like throw things at people and interfere. But then Joey visually like jumps in and like beats them up and is like, leave him alone. There is a moment after that where, and I think this was, I mean, obviously it was probably done on purpose, but when they start to raise the priest out of it, because I think it's like,
it's so crazy.
Oh my God. I got chills. Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, it was like, the speech was fine.
Pigeon cage, I think, visual reference. The way they've got them all on the layers of the ship. So you just have like these stacks of people kind of coming out of the dark looking on. And then up at the top, you have like the mobsters, like really ominously looking down with the white, the like sort of overexposed silhouette going on.
It's definitely a play on who has the most power, and the priest giving that speech, he was like rising up out of it,
and he's literally lifting them up, right? And like with that shot where he's going up on the shipment with the body who is now a martyr, right? Like like that guy, the one guy in the Union who was brave enough to step up and got killed, is now being made a martyr, right? He's got the priest on his side to be like, this could kill you. Look at what happened to this man. It's your lives are at stake.
It's interesting because I feel that the issue that we're having with this film is that its meaning is very surface level. It's like when Terry talks. Oh, by the way, the guy is Keo Dugan, because I wrote all the names because I wanted it's Keo Dugan, the guy that gets killed with the whiskey. Way to make fun about like dying by alcohol.
Well, it's the thing that he was the most excited for. It's the thing he was waiting for. This is his moment of triumph, right? A good payday whiskey. And he's Irish, or I don't know if he's Irish actually.
I mean, regardless of it, they seem that they have a lot of Irish ties, and then they like the whiskey. But the point that I was trying to make is that the fact that from the moment that Terry starts talking about the pigeons, that he's talking about people. That he's making an allegory, a comparison between like the monsters and then that imagery that you're talking about, John, where they are below and then the people are the monsters are on top. It's the thing about the hawks. The hawks are always on top of the buildings looking for prey, these kind of things, and then they throw things at them, or they want to kill them. If they want to kill them, they do it. But I feel that what the triggering moment of this movie is that everything was okay as long as they didn't take it too far. And then for some reason, and this resonates, and I'm sorry I'm going to bring this up, but this resonates with today because it's always a death and a martyr that spars things up. So then first it was Joey, then it was Kyle Dugan, the same way that we're seeing it today with like George Floyd.
It's that idea that like, okay, we scare everybody a little bit, and they'll comply. But if they start pushing back, we have to push back even harder, right? And we've got this guy who could sell us out to a higher authority, like the U.S. government, potentially, right? He could blow the whistle on us in a way that has the feds knocking down our door. And so it just like it escalates until it crosses that line. And like I kind of got the feeling that this probably isn't the first person they've offed, but he happened to have an ally at this point, right? And so somebody who could make sure that he didn't die in vain, right? It's like if I'm gonna get offed, at least you have to martyr me. I feel like we need to, if we do another run of classics, we need to pick some films that are a little less Christianity and get some other religions there. We've had a lot of biblical reference. A lot of.
I was surprised. I mean, I guess because there was a priest, but yeah, I was like, oh, this is what this movie is. Okay, but it made sense. It fit within the character. So
yeah.
You know, one thing that I mean, if you guys want to talk about it, because it's the one thing that keeps like resonating with me, is that there's always like if you're writing a script, you know, like then there's always towards the end what they call the whiff of death. It's an actual death or something that feels as something dies, and then it triggers a series of events. And apparently, it's part of the structure of narrative.
It's often the low point of Act 2, right? It's like near the end of Act 2, you hit your lowest point, so that you can then have the narrative swing back up.
It's not necessarily the all is lost moment, but it does have. I've heard it as the whiff of death, which is an actual death or not. But it's interesting. What seems to me interesting is that there's always this tragic event associated with the triggering of something happening. And then we're living it right now with what happened with George Floyd. Like, you know, like it was the spark that ignited a completely different revolution, like a shift. And then a part of me goes back to things like the concept of preemptive strike with Bush. And it's like there's always this necessity for some reason that you cannot cross certain lines until the evil has been done, right? But there is no prevention of the evil. But then when we do preventing evil, then because we don't know if it was effective or not, we didn't know if evil was coming or not, then we become very judgmental about the actions that are taken before that. I mean, and I'm using
that idea of
the example,
pre-crime, right? Like you can't stop a crime before it happens necessarily, but once the crime happens, we can use that as an example to attempt to stop future instances of that, right?
I also think it's a little bit, I mean, I think the George Floyd example might be not a great one in this case because police are an institution of power where they've been doing this for years and years and years. So is there another example we could use? Because we could totally
done
stop
with that story either. Like,
there's been thousands of like Black people. Not, I mean, I don't know if thousands is an exaggeration, but like there's been a plethora, that could have been prevented. So,
But all I'm saying is that there is the consistency, that there is a line being crossed at a moment where the line, it's where people are paying attention to the line, and then that propels things to happen. But then it almost makes me feel like, why do we need to wait until the evil happens before that? Because then we become very critical about preemptive things. I mean, I don't even know where exactly. I'm not raising this question as I'm going to tell you the solution. I'm just basically pondering the fact that there's always the waiting for the thing to happen to make it okay for us to react.
I think it's because we can only respond to what's happened, right? And like in this case, and that doesn't even mean it's going to work, right? It's like this guy gets martyred, and all of the remaining union workers basically give up anyway, you know? Like it takes like even another person coming in to get to himself get martyred before they'll, or to defy getting martyred, right? Like, because that's kind of what he does at the end. Is like he like attempts to defy their putting him down completely. You know, it's like, I think George Floyd is a hard comparison just because the story's not done. Like, something did shift, right? Like, the police are an institution of power on another level, like way more than the mob, like, has ever been. And so the idea of them getting caught red-handed and like us still watching them get away with it, I think has created a shift. But we're still in the midst of whatever that is. Like, it's clearly, we're not
there hasn't really been justice.
Yeah, there hasn't been a resolution. And we don't know if that's the low point. But it was, I do think it was valid in that it was a shift.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, when that happened, there was sort of a bigger wake up to the problem than in years past. And like, sometimes it's incremental and sometimes it's an avalanche. But you never know. It's like, you could look at Matthew Shepard's death in a similar light, right? And then like a good decade, little less than 2 decades later, we have gay marriage and like, a lot of rights equalities happening. So you could kind of, say that like these films do an expedited version of what kind of history tells us happens when injustice is rampant and going unchecked for a long time. It takes something. It takes it takes getting caught red-handed, I feel like, and to get kind of called out properly. But I don't know where else I was going with that. That was the point. I was like, in the moment.
Well, even if you're called out properly, it takes like that and then people backing you to fight against it, because that's what Dugan was doing, and he died. So, but I thought the ending was a little convenient.
It's weird,
Convenience,
right?
the wrong word. Yeah, like because he gets the snot bitten out of him. He gets like just like kicked to near death.
Yeah, to pieces.
And and then some people come up and they're like, "Hey, if you go in, we'll all go. We're not going to go work unless you work. And then once we get in, then we'll be able to overtake everything like legally." And I'm like, "Wait, what? Like, so why can't you do that without him? He's literally, he should go to the hospital." I mean, I think it was powerful, but like, I didn't really get that. And there was nothing really like, I felt like it was like this really big moment of like, oh my God, I might die before I like walk through the doors, but then he like walked in and he was fine. And it just felt like they ran out of steam and were like, okay, this is going to be the big moment. And it felt wasn't rushed. Really.
The setup for that ending was very rushed because it didn't feel properly set up ahead of time. It's like
this is the solution to all our problems.
Them who can work, but they've already said everybody gets to work, right?
Right.
But then we're only going to work
except for Terry.
Right, except for Terry. If Terry gets to work, I guess is that point. And it's entirely symbolic because they don't really discard the mob in the process, right? Like,
the only thing I guess that happens is that no one listens to
because then he's telling them to not go in at the end. But it's like, why would he do that? He would lose money. Like, the mob needs them to work. That's the thing, right?
But then they said something about if they go in and work, somehow they're going to be able to take power away from the mob. Yeah, I didn't understand what that was.
I was
about,
unclear on how that would happen.
It's because the way that I understood it is because it was the act of defiance. It was basically saying Johnny Friendly represents them, and then Johnny Friendly tells them something. Then they witness that. Then first they're against Terry, right? Because Terry was a whistleblower, like a canary, like they said, right? And then after they see Terry going and then talking to Johnny Friendly and being like, you are this person. I like that expose. I like when he just tells us as it is, like, you pushes us, you abuses us, you do all this stuff. Then he beats him up. And then all the people around there, like they have, it's the difference between saying, I know the mafia did it, to witnessing the mafia doing it. Right. So then these people are there, and then they're seeing, okay, so this is what you do with people that disagree with you. And then now you're telling me now you want to save your own skin on my dime. Like, I'm not going to go to war because you're losing your business. I feel that the act of defiance is what that ending was, and I feel that when they say if you cross that threshold, is because they are like, that's basically the workers of the union saying, we do not answer for this union anymore, because there is this guy standing at the door just waiting to see, like, are you gonna go to work or not? And then he is waiting for Johnny Friendly to give the word, and then he notices that Johnny Friendly does not have the power anymore. It's more like it's more about telling the guy who owns the shipyard, we don't answer to this man anymore. So then it's implied basically saying, like, they are now either an independent union or they have broke ties with Johnny Friendly, which was the objective of it.
Well, yeah, that. But then wasn't he about to he was about to get arrested anyway? Like, isn't that why they were angry with Terry, because they spoke out against him, and they were like, he was like, oh, any day now they could be coming for me.
It's because they were under investigation. Before they weren't under investigation. Like it was.
He was like, any slip ups now, and we're screwed.
Oh,
exactly. There was a watching eye on them with evidence.
Yeah, he was just kind of being like paranoid at that point, right? And like ultra, like, what are you doing with guns? If they catch us with guns, that's going to make us look like disreputable, right? Because they do have... It's interesting
because even if it's like they do have that moment where they're like, get rid of the guns, but then they like beat the shit out of Terry, like in front of everybody, as if that's not going to be suspicious. Yeah. After he, rats him out.
Right. And the truth is that it didn't stop the mob, right? Like... Right. When the movie came out, the East Coast longshoremen were still being run by the mob. And this movie kind of helped shed some light on it, or bring attention to it anyway. But it's like, to say it's got a happy ending is kind of false. And if we look at it, like a fiction, it's like, I just wonder, I feel like it might have been more powerful if Terry didn't make it into the doors and the workers didn't go to work, right? Like, it's a strike. Yeah. Like they actually... I
also think it's like...
But they need the work also, right? Like, they all need it. Yeah. Yeah, I found the ending kind of... It sat strange with me. I didn't really feel like it was... Like, despite how powerful the shots are... that final shot of him walking into the building, like along the row of people waiting, it's a very well constructed frame. Like, it's a very like powerful composition. It's very dramatic. It's very dynamic. But I found that, like, it didn't have the same kind of hit with me as maybe I wanted it to, right? Because I do feel like there's a lot of powerful moments in this movie. And it just felt kind of strange at the end. It felt like rushed and just, it's kind of odd.
Can I take a little shift here?
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to talk about, one, the relationship between Terry and Edie, but two, the symbolism that was kind of created by her glove. That is the scene where he first talks to her and they like walk down and she like drops her glove and he grabs it. That's the scene that I feel like is always shown to me in all my classes. Because apparently it was an accident. It wasn't blocked. I mean, I think maybe in a first
take, it happened during rehearsal. What I read was that it happened during rehearsal, and Elia Kazan said, "We're keeping that." Like,
because it's perfect.
We're gonna add it to the movie.
Yeah, because like it's more of a reason for her to feel like she needs to stay because she's uncomfortable around him clearly, and he's just like totally. He's like, oh yeah, this is my glove. This is my glove now. Ha ha ha! I'm wearing it.
He
Like
wears it, and
totally
he's
just being a
clearly like getting it
dude.
all smudgy and stuff. Like,
Yeah, and he's just totally just. I don't know. I was kind of annoyed with him with her for a good portion of the movie, especially when he tries to like get her attention and he kicks her door down to like come in and like and then he kisses her and she's like, oh, everything's better, and I'm like, oh my god, I hate this so much. Like so
film
much.
in the
But
50s, American film in
yeah.
the 50s.
But to go back to the glove, that scene is just great. And then it comes back when he decides to go and fess up to her about being a part of her brother's death. Um, but what was interesting, what I wouldn't have expected from a film of this time, is that they don't really play that scene out. They don't we don't hear the conversation. I mean, we don't really need to because we know what happened, but they do a very artistic not montage but sequence of like you hear the train and like pigeons fly, I think, and then she like gasps and we see the gloves in her face, and it just reminds me of that scene of this like it just, I don't know, it gave me chills also because you feel so bad for her. But the thing is, I thought she had a good I thought she was catching on that he knew something about it in general.
I thought so too.
And so I was surprised that she was so surprised, but also she had like kind of fallen for him at that point.
How directly involved he is shocking.
Right. You know? Right.
Because it's one thing for him to know something, but like he's literally part of it,
Right. Well, but then that guy calls him out and he's like, hey, you were there with me that night. Remember on Joey's death? Like he almost says it.
On that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know. She probably just was uncomfortable and was like, I need to get out of here. Like, let me not be walking around with these strange men. Yeah. But she also felt like Terry was just following her. So I guess it's easy to
act like a delinquent.
Yeah, he does. Very much so. So I thought that whole sequence was really interesting, and I do understand why it's used as an example. It's just such a great small thing that you can do in a scene that gives it so much meaning and brings it back later. The glove thing. So I applaud our lady director, for that. So
there is one thing that I noticed that he kept doing, and I don't know why, but he keep putting things in her mouth. Like he keep trying to fit, like he keep like try to like every. I didn't. I know that I didn't notice that. That's interesting. I wrote the thing in my notes, but it's because for at least 3 times they're together. And then he tries to feed her, but he cannot like put things on her mouth without her. She's just like, eat this and then put things on her mouth. I don't know, like watch the movie again and you'll.
Because maybe it's like
a couple of times she does.
Okay.
But it happens at least 3 times. Like
maybe it's like
there is cake or something, and he just goes right away and puts it on her mouth, and I go like, why are you doing that?
What's that, Danielle?
I don't know. It was weird.
It could be like I feel like this is me reaching, but it could be like, he's trying to like take care of the pigeons. He's trying to like keep the power, like, oh yeah, no, I'm like nurturing you. Shh, don't worry about it. Like, but and she's like not taking it because she's also like the only one who's like, I smell bullshit and I'm over this. Like, it could be that. I didn't notice it though, but I'm curious to go back and look now because I feel like that's like a kind of creepy thing.
That is a little creepy. I think I probably just took it for like business. Just like,
do you feed your business partners? Like
no, when I say business, I mean like actor's business, like giving his character touchstones.
Okay.
Sorry. I took it like Marlon Brando is creating business for his character, so it's things for him to do. This is like when you always see Brad Pitt eating, or you know, like the way in Seven Samurai, Shiromifune is like always scratching himself, you know. So I kind of initially took it like that, but I think that there is kind of a metaphor with the pigeons that he also does feed the, you know, and that like he's sort of treating her like she's one of the pigeons, but that's not her stance, right? I think there's a nice metaphor there, whether intentional or happy accident. I'm not sure, but it sounds legit.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the whole point with his character is that it's like he's kinder than what he does requires him to be. And then she notices it. She tells the father, it's like he tries to act tough, but he has this look in his eyes. And then you know, like you see him and he's all conflicted. I mean, the whole thing starts because he feels that they cross the line. He goes like, why do you have to kill them? Why do you have to kill them? And then now he feels that it's part instrumental in that. And then he goes into this redemption road that starts with the pigeon and ends with the people. But it's and the interesting aspect about it is that he has to go against the father figures, which is clearly which is very similar to what is happening to us right now. You know, like where you have to look back to the father, to your grandfather, to your great grandfather, people who nurtured you, people who care about you, people who raised you, and then you have to question the loyalty that you have. Like, am I loyal to you? Or am I loyal to what you represent? And then the moment that I understand what you represent, what do I do?
Well, because it's going to cost me my livelihood. With the contender speech that he gives his brother, because it's very much like I went through this before. Like he chose family over his own well-being, right?
Conscience.
Like he was told to dive in a fight that would have led him to a number one contender title fight. Which those things make you a lot of money. They bring fame and fortune. And he gave that up for his brother. And it's like, this time I'm not giving up what is righteous, you know, because it's like he chose his brother over himself, but it's like now he's being asked to choose his brother over everyone, like everyone's well-being. And he's like, you also had a responsibility to me, and like you didn't return that favor. Like you didn't really take care of me. Like if you cared, I shouldn't have to make that choice. Like,
right.
And so I think that that's kind of like him. It's that moment where he like, because he's made the decision even before we get in that car, right? He feels pretty set, but it's a moment where he reveals to us like that I did learn my lesson from that last thing. And it's that you don't care about me, you care about you. And like I showed that I cared about you already, but I'm gonna shift that to the pigeons who are being eaten by you hawks. Because he's not, you know, it's like if he were a hawk himself, he wouldn't have thrown that fight even, probably, you know?
Right.
Like, despite being a boxer, he is kind of a big softie. You know, he's been hit in the head maybe one too many times. He's a little on the slow side.
They call him a bum.
A lot. They call him a bum a lot. And he is a bum, right? He admits it.
Yeah.
He says, I am a bum because he threw it away to help out his brother, to do a favor, right? Can you imagine asking a sibling to throw away their career so that you could make a little extra money? Right? Like,
yeah, no.
That's cold-blooded. It's cold-blooded.
I feel that the deeper layers of the story is when you escalate them, right? Like if you start, because I mean, and this resonates a lot with me, for some reason. I mean, but I'm not going to go into details of it, but it feels almost like if you take this from the mob, like if you take this from the mob and you put it like in the highest social stratus of like a political arena or a economic arena in a country, right? He is a bum because he lives in privilege. Because he has something, he's been treated by Johnny Friendly as a kid. He's been made fun for not being bright. That's why he goes like, count the money, and then they respect. He goes like, I lost the count, and they go like, oh yeah, you're like, great job, Einstein. Like people make fun of him, but he is kind of like the talking kid that they like. He did them a favor, and now he lives in privilege. So he's a bum, not because he chose to be a bum, but because the life of privilege like
they do take care of him, even
him.
if they make fun of him.
And then why would you? So this is interesting because it proposes the question that a person's journey towards righteousness does not have to start on righteousness. It might as well just, like, his decision took him into a road of righteousness, and he had to go against his own family and understand that the people that he loved were doing something wrong. And then this is the things that are difficult about even today. I mean, going back
but
to
they
to
threaten
that
to
point,
take away his privilege, which kind of undermines his redemption a little bit, right? Because he acts when they say, you have to stop seeing this girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, it's dangerous for us. If you don't stop seeing her, we're going to take away your cushy job, and we're going to send you down with the real workers, right? And if you whistleblow on us, we're like not even going to give you that. Like so it takes him kind of being threatened to lose all this stuff to actually cross that line.
It's what it poses the question to me. It poses the question of understanding, what am I asking of a person when I'm asking them to do the right thing?
Right.
Because most likely, if I have to ask you to do the right thing, it's because the right thing is in detriment to yourself. And then a person who finds themselves in a position of saying, am I going to be the only righteous person to change the whole thing? Because if I'm going to go down into the hole and then nobody else is going to follow me, then it is understandable when a lot of people are very resilient to do it. So it's either a communal effort, but not an individual effort, because then you end up like the people that every time that they gave that jacket to somebody else, that person died. Like Joy died, and then they gave the jacket to Dugan. Dugan dies, and then they gave the jacket to these kids. So it's like it's passing on that responsibility of being the righteous person. But then
that's a really nice metaphor. I missed that one.
Yeah,
and it's like it's very relevant to today. It's very relevant with everything that. And then from the position that I'm speaking, I understand that there's a lot of red flags on me saying in it. But it's also saying, like, what am I asking of you? What am I asking of a person who has a lot of privilege to just like go against their own company, against their own father, against their own family, and then change the perspective? What is it going to cost this person? What am I asking from a person to do? And then that brings it, like, if it's a group effort, then maybe people feel more encouraged. But I feel that his journey is an example of that. It's to the point in which it's unbearable to keep doing in it. And then you figure out that your peace of mind is more important than the privilege that you have.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like most about this movie is that his character, Terry's character, does feel complicated, right?
Yeah,
he does feel, despite how like they make fun of him for being dumb and how kind of simple he can come off, he's an incredibly layered character, and his moral dilemma is an interesting one for all the reasons that you were just saying, Jose, because it's like, it's like, why do I have to sacrifice to help these people who, I have been having problems, but like, that's not been my problem, and it's like, what does it take to get someone to sort of cross that line? Is a very interesting question, a very human one that we're constantly asking that question, like, how can we spread empathy? And it's a seemingly impossible task, right? Because to gain empathy, you have to gain experience, and that oftentimes means experience that you would naturally seek to avoid.
right.
It's a crazy thing. I think this movie had a little bit more depth than I initially gave it credit for, which is why I love having these discussions. I love talking about these films. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Or maybe we wrap this one up, in a more reasonable time?
Yeah, I mean, overall, we don't have to talk about them directly, but I felt like I really enjoyed hearing the different slang that people use. Like, I don't know, I felt like it was really well thought out. Like, at some point he's like, oh, I foxed them. Like, he ran away and escaped. I was like, I don't know. I took a lot of enjoyment out of that. So I think it was very well crafted. Yeah, it was very well put together, very well thought out in every way. So I do want to give it that credit.
Yeah, I do think it's well made. For something that's like it's based on was it a play first? It feels kind of like a play.
It does.
Right, but it also has a really nice visual element, and I feel like makes use of a lot of really interesting techniques. Like you mentioned, the moment where he reveals to her, like, it's such a different way of doing that moment than a lot of films do, and I always appreciate whenever we see that kind of that novelty come up, where people are trying new ways of doing the same thing, because it's like, you know, we've seen the evil, or the confession of evil, so many times that it's like, well, what can you do with that? You just kind of like give us a little Kuleshov effect, you know. We'll just like surprise you, and we'll throw pigeons in the trains, and like all of our visual motifs and kind of these smash cuts. So I do think there was a lot of like really kind of nice blocking and cinematography, and clearly a lot of great metaphors going on throughout the whole thing, between the pigeons and the jackets and possibly the feeding.
So he himself, like, sorry, I like saw a note that I put, but there's a point where he like eats some of the bird feed himself before he goes to go talk to the police, and I was like, oh my god, he's a pigeon. Okay, sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very direct. I mean, and I think it's complacent too, because like when Edie goes to him and then they're talking like he places himself inside the cage and she's outside the cage. And that's a very, very strange visual image. And then there is this net in between them. And then he looks at the pigeon, he says, the shot got a mate, huh? The eating, sleeping, flying around like crazy, raising gobs of squabs. Like, he's complacent with that. He doesn't want anything else for life, but that complacency to say like, oh, look, I'm taking care of this pigeon. This pigeon should be grateful to me, because he's not seeing that he's trapped inside the pigeon cage, and then he have become complacent with that. And it's part of the mentality of it. I love how when after he goes to testify, they have this shot of a butler that brings a phone to a faceless guy. They never show the face of this guy. He goes like, if John calls me, I'm not here.
The cat.
And it's always
weird. Yeah,
it's like the guy is that there's always a person on top, right? There's always the man. This is the concept of the man. Like, these people are they're not independent. There's always a higher force that will just completely abandon them when they need it. And I thought that was clever to show it that way. And then to make this man faceless. I think that was very, very important to connect that point.
I feel like there had to have been some significance to the cat, but I did not get what that was.
It's privilege. She's probably like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because it's just like, it's random. Anyway, yeah. I was like, why is there a cat here? But okay. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Sorry.
All right. Now go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for having this conversation with me. This is a good one. I did enjoy this film. I think overall, and I enjoyed the discussion with you. Next, we have next up will be The Bicycle Thief, aka Bicycle Thieves.
It's really depressing.
Depending on the translation. Danielle tells me it's really depressing. I have yet to see it, but I've seen it homaged many a time, and that's one of the reasons that I picked this film, because the Italian New Wave was so influential, and this is one of sort of the seminal films. I think I'm getting that right with the New Wave.
Italian neorealism, I think.
Yeah, and what's the other word where it's just like life happening?
Cinema verite.
Yeah, cinema verite.
Yeah.
Is another one that uses that in a big way.
It just sounds better because it's
cinema verite.
French.
It sounds nice. So that's up next. This has been a great conversation. Jose, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Danielle, thank you. And where can the people find you?
You can find me at Danielle Stories, spelled exactly the way you think, on Instagram. Nice. And Twitter, but I only tweet when I think I'm funny and no one's around to hear it, which is, anyway.
That's Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't really use my Twitter either. You can find me at John in Paradox. There's no H in any of that. I've also started an artist Instagram, Art in Paradox. if you want to follow just my sort of illustration projects that I have going on.
You should. They're fun.
Thank you.
They're fun. I enjoy them. Yeah.
I always appreciate the encouragement and support I get from you two online. Until next time, everyone, that's been our show, and watch more movies. Preferably good ones.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.